Hey, this is Pat Duke, and my claim to fame is that I am a friend of the funniest woman in Chicago, Kathleen. Also, I do some voiceover work. The past few years has been mostly narration for me, something I swore I would never do because it's what we call in the business heavy lifting. It's a lot of words. Right now you can hear me on Swamp People on the History Channel, which I've been doing for 5 years and going into our 6th year soon. Ultimate Survival Alaska, which is on National Geographic. It's the show I really love the most because I get to speak like I'm speaking to you right now, which is nice to use my own voice because in Swamp People I have a very heavy Southern accent, which is not that hard for me to do because I'm originally from Tennessee. And then there's another show I'm on called Buying the Bayou, which is kind of a like being a cheerleader for really weird little places down in the Gulf area. And also on a show called Texas Car Wars, which is all about people fixing up cars and selling them. Narration. How to do it. I think one of the first things that you have to do when it comes to narration is win the audition. And you can't win the audition if you don't see the audition. So whoever you are associated with, if this is your dream, then they need to be able to get you the auditions that you can win. Then you're in the game. So you really have to lock it from the audition exactly what it is that they're trying to get across and what your job is. One thing that is always true is that the narrator is omniscient. The narrator sees all and knows all. You're the only person in the show that actually knows everything. And you're the last person that comes into the show, which is kind of interesting. They've shot everything, they have edited everything, they have put the sound effects in and the music, and then it's time for the narrator. And you have yet to see word one of any of this, and you come in to put the icing on the cake. It's really good to have a sense of it before you get there. You got to know it. You got to know something. You've got to do your research and you've got to ask the right questions. How else could you be omniscient? Omniscient in that you know everything, you know where they are, you set the table, you set the scene, you guide people sometimes through a map, whatever needs to be brought to the viewer's attention to keep them on track with the show. The best narration technique I can think of is to try and connect with the viewer at home by being their friend. Being real. That is kind of the new thing that's been happening in narration over the past 5 or 6 years. When I talk about omniscient and you begin to think voice of God, well, that is just not the case anymore. They don't want the voice of God. A guy who speaks like this and has the big voice and the pipes. That is yesterday's news. What is happening today is just more of a real approach. And Mike Rowe from Deadliest Catch on Discovery, he was really the first guy that came through there and just said, hey, I'm just a regular guy. Let's talk about what's going on in this show. Let's talk about what these guys are doing. So Mike Rowe is my hero. So I studied him when I got into this business. Of course, my first big show was Swamp People, where I had to play this character as well as do all the other things. And through that character, we were able to put the viewer to where they felt like they were sitting in the boat with the guys as they go hunting gators. And that apparently helped the show be pretty successful. But it's tricky. It's tricky when you're doing a character because you've got to maintain that. And now I've maintained the same character for 5 years. So naturally, it's very easy for me to get in that character and do that guy. But the guy obviously is not me. But there's part of me in that guy. What else? If you can narrate like you're somebody's friend or like you're putting your arm around your buddy and you're saying, hey, well, let's check this out. Sometimes they want you to discover things along the way. So you're just pointing out things and then you get into some sort of a struggle. And what actually happens is it's your job to manipulate the emotion of the viewer. Because a lot of times these adventure reality shows, they just shoot a lot of stuff. And as they're doing it, they're coming up with ideas for what the show is going to be. So it's your job to manipulate the emotion of the viewer. But along with that is manipulating the intention of the players. Because if someone is standing there and they're fishing or hunting or whatever, and they're not saying anything, and you've got a narrator whispering in your ear, he's feeling this or he's feeling that, he's going through this, then it becomes real. There's a lot of manipulation going on, and as a narrator, that's really your job. We're going to get down to some of the brass tacks now about how to approach this. First of all, there are many different ways to approach recording narration for television. One of the ways is my least favorite way is for me to have no advance information about the show, come in cold as the narrator. They put up a big screen in front of me and a mic and a script, and they say, let's go. Then you're in a situation where they want to direct you line by line. That is cumbersome because now you're looking at the screen and you're fitting your read into these little open slots that they've left for you. So naturally, you don't have the freedom to express the lines in your own way because you're always in a time crunch to fit that hole. So often they will direct every line. And normally you'll read a line, and then if you ask them to do it this way, it's the best way. I'm going to read the line, and you can record that, but the second time I read it is the take. And normally they're going to want a couple of line reads. Okay, so that's line read, line by line by line. And I've seen sessions like that go on for 6.5 or 7 hours to get 1 hour of TV. That's painful. And it's always the case that the more cooks you have in the kitchen, everyone's got to have an opinion. It's how they justify their jobs. Anyway, my favorite way, and a way that I am able to request often, is there are no solid rules here. But the way I like to work it is I get the rough cut or fine cut the night before the session. They usually have a dummy voice reading my lines. I don't want to hear that. I don't even want to see the script particularly, because what I want to do is get a sense of every scene in the show, because that's really my job, is to reflect and expound upon what people are seeing. So if I can feel it with my eyes, then when the session comes up the next day, I don't really need any helpers. I understand, and all I have to do is get that across to the people. Those sessions go very fast. You can do an hour of TV in an hour and a half. Sessions for these narration projects are usually booked for 3 hours. And typically it does take 3 hours. Often before you even get to recording the show, they've got to sell the show. So they're looking for the voice that's going to sell the show and work the show. So we do a sizzle reel, where they'll take scenes from the show and strap them all together with voiceover. And it's a little more excited read than you'll typically do in a show. But the sizzle reel really sells the show to the network. And then if your voice is on the sizzle reel, there's a pretty good chance they're going to want to use you on the show. And again, the great thing about getting a series is that it can last a long time and be work. So that's what the goal is, get as much work as possible. Typically, these shows will not start off with 23 or 22 episodes. They'll start off with a handful, 10. 10's a good number. It's a pretty standard number. So that's the first season. And then if that does well, they may bump it up to 16. The next season, they may bump it up to 22. We're doing about 26 episodes a year on Swamp People. So that's a half a year of good work. What else? Okay, so you won the audition, you've done the sizzle reel, you are now doing the show. The first thing on the show is what's called a cold open. And a cold open is usually a series of quick little shots of what they can anticipate seeing in the show. And the cold open also gives a sense of what the show is about, a sense of the feeling of what the contestants or participants or actors are going to be going through during that hour of television. The cold open can be just a few lines or it can be several lines. The cold open will end with the name of the show, like, welcome to the swamp, welcome to whatever. And that's pretty much the way that goes. Now, getting back to the way to approach it, the technique to use. If you can get a relationship going with the executive producer, the EP is normally the guy that's directing you on the voiceover session. What you want to have is an understanding of how you like to work And since most of us are actors now and not the old school announcer, we like to work in scenes. If you can block out a scene, hopefully you've seen a cut, so you know where the scenes are. And the scenes are usually broken up for you on the page. So you look at line 17 to line 38, and you say, well, that feels like a really good scene. You're glancing over it for the first time. You've got your pencil out and you're marking things that you see that could be problematic for you. Or for me, if I'm having to speak in a dialect, then there's certain words that I might have trouble in that dialect, and I want to circle those. And you're just zipping through that, and you're talking to the executive producer and saying, this feels like the scene, right? And he goes, yeah, that's the scene. So let's do that. But they really have to trust you to take that many lines, because they may want an A, B, and C. So you do a read, which you know is not the read because you're just getting the words in your mouth. And then the second read you know is going to be really good. But if they want a third read, hey, let's do this, let's pump it up here, let's give it a little more energy, let's make it feel like something's desperate or there's a struggle or a fight or whatever, then you're doing that third read. So they've got an A, B, and C. Well, A, B, and C of 21 or more lines is a lot for them to choose from. So they're sitting there with their pencil and they're making notes and stuff so that they can turn to the engineer and say, okay, I need on line 217, I want C. On line 218, I want B. So it's a lot. But for you, as a performer, you'll always do better if you can do the scene. That's just the way it is. So then the groups of those scenes are what we call an act. We've got the cold open, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5, maybe even 6, depending on the number of commercials they want to run, because that's what it really is. You've got a scene, an act, and then sell some stuff. And they'll usually recap. They'll use about 20 seconds to recap the end of the previous act. And it's very annoying if you're watching the show. You go, oh man, why are they saying that again? And they say it's because someone may have just tuned in. So that's the reason that happens. And then you get all the way through, and then in the final act, there'll usually be a recap of the entire show with some sort of wasn't that wonderful? And then sometimes shows will give a tease about the next episode. So that's pretty much what you've got going there. Now, as far as keeping energy up, you really have to kind of create your character. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily talking in a different voice. Although you may have to do that at times. That's very popular, to speak in the dialect of the people that you are talking about, the actors. They call them actors. So if that's the case, then you really have to be super consistent. The other thing is that the energy of moving the show along, it's your job. You've got to be comfortable with yourself, and you've got to be physically comfortable. I think standing up to do long-form narration is a big no-no, because you get your body involved, you get too much energy going, and it just becomes a physical activity rather than what it's supposed to be, the conversation, which is more of a mental exercise, and you need to be relaxed to talk to your friend about what's going on. Now, you can be relaxed and be energetic, like I just did. But the biggest thing is being comfortable with your space, your physical nature. So if you have a way you like to sit, comfortable clothing that you like to wear, because like I said in the beginning, this is the heavy lifting of voiceover work. It's big, and you've got to stay consistent and stay real, speak your truth, and be a good friend. If you can just pull that off and win the audition, some good things can happen. Okay, well, I'm sure I have gabbed up way too much time. So I just want to say good luck out there to everyone. And thanks, Kathleen, for having me. And keep being funny. You're the best. Bye.